What is up, Wizards fans? Welcome into another Believe in Wizards podcast. I'm Matt Modderno. Joining me today is Austin Veazey of NoleGameday.com and Here the Spear. We're just going through, we're covering all the draft picks the Wizards took this year. Another year taking three prospects in one draft is pretty loaded for the Wizards, so it gives us more to talk about. But Austin, thanks for coming on and excited to talk some Jamir Watkins with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's always great talking Florida State basketball, even when they're not great. And I'm excited to see another Florida State guy in the NBA for the first time in 4 years now.
Yeah, been a little longer after it was rolling pretty steadily for a while there, but hopefully better things are here to come for you with Mr. Locks in town there and the guys he's bringing in. So that'll be exciting. We're here to talk about Jamir Watkins today. He averaged about 18.5 points per game as a fifth-year player, 5.7 rebounds, 2.5 assists, a little over a steal a game, just shy of 3 turnovers, which we don't love. I want to talk through that a little bit. 32% from three on about 5 attempts, so good volume. About 43% from the field and about 75% from the free throw line. I guess just first off, Austin, you saw this guy a ton this year. I've seen him a decent amount. I saw him a little bit in the VCU days here as well. But what do you think of the pick and what do you think of Jamir overall?
I think Jamir's a really fun player. These last 2 years at Florida State were some weird teams, and he was being asked to do a lot more than really anybody expected. You know, when Florida State first got that transfer commitment a couple years ago, I was wondering, like, is this really the guy that's going to help this team elevate? And the more I watched his VCU stuff, I was like, this guy's going to be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And he was given the ball right away, and he made it work. That first season at Florida State, which I thought should have been an all-ACC season, he led Florida State in pretty much every single statistical category: points, rebounds, assists. I think he tied for first, steals, all of that. He was up there at the top, and he was just lightning in a bottle with his on-ball defense, especially being able to lead out and get in transition and create for himself. His ability to draw fouls was something that really surprised me. He's a really strong, sturdy guard who can just get downhill and draw contact with the best of them. The 3-point shot never really developed. He came back to college for his final season because he wanted to work on that.
Mm-hmm.
But he dealt with a minor shoulder injury for the latter half of November into early December. So that's why his shot, especially in non-conference play, didn't look great, and his free throw numbers were really struggling in non-conference play. But once he got into conference play, it looked like the same old Jamir Watkins who could just get downhill. The turnovers were an issue, but he was basically Florida State's only primary initiator on offense. Their point guard play the last few years hasn't been great with guys like Jalen Worley, who's now at Gonzaga, I think. Chandler Jackson, who, again, a player I like, just not what Florida State needed. And Daquan Davis, who's at Providence. Now, there wasn't a lot of on-ball creation. Jamir Watkins was asked to do a lot of that, but he's a good passer. He can get downhill with really the best of them in college basketball. If he can develop that shot into, 34, 35, 36% three-point shooter, that'll help a lot. And having Chris Middleton on the team is going to help him a lot in that aspect, I believe. But, the Wizards last year were 28th in defensive rating, 28th in points off turnovers, 21st in fouls. These are all going to be areas that Jamir is going to impact right away if he gets on the floor in his first year or two. Obviously, second-round picks are usually two-way contract guys, but he should be able to help in that aspect.
There's a guy for the Wizards right now in Justin Champagnie that comes to mind for me, of a guy that kind of bounced around, did some G League time, was on a two-way for the Wizards. And then ultimately, once he got some minutes, it's like, oh, well, he's not a great shooter. He's not a great this. He's not a great that. But he's just good at basketball. And I feel like that's sort of how I feel about Jamir. Hopefully, it doesn't take him as long to kind of find his footing. And we can see it here in Washington. But I think one of the things that most pops out when you watch him play is kind of one of the first things you led off with there is basically his ability to turn defense into offense. And that's just not a thing the Wizards have had. Even for the guys that have been good individual defenders, they're not really, creating a lot of dynamic plays that have resulted in any free, easy looks for them as a team. And I think that's something, he does maybe better than anybody in this draft, is just being able to cause some chaos. And I think that's, some stuff he learned at VCU and honed at Florida State, and just be able to attack off of that. And, didn't always do that the most efficiently, only finished about 50% at the rim, was definitely worse than that in half court, 45%. But I think a lot of that comes down to context as well. And this is where I think you can really help folks we can all watch the tape and things like that, but we're not studying the rest of this Florida State team. again, not a lot of spacing around him, not a lot of playmaking. So it was really just like him put his head down and either try to like, just blow right by a guy or attack in a ball screen. And there's usually a packed lane for him because everybody in the ACC knew that this is the dude that made things go for Florida State. And I think you nailed it, right? Like, it was probably not a role he was cut out for, like just leading an entire ACC basketball team by himself. And if he'd had somebody just create like a few easier looks for him, I think that shooting percentage looks, at least a couple of percentage points different in the positive direction.
Yeah, you absolutely hit the nail on the head that the team A had no primary ball handlers and B had no spacing. I mean, you were lucky if you had one good shooter on the floor for Jamir Watkins to dish out to, much less an NBA offense that's going to have all the spacing around him. So yeah, when he's driving, a lot of times him shooting through 2 or 3 people at the rim was just a better shot than kicking out to someone who's a 25% 3-point shooter. It's just a better shot. His frame does so much for him on defense. You mentioned how good he is on that end of the floor. Him being 6'5" without shoes, 6'6", 6'7" in shoes, with a nearly 7-foot wingspan is just swallowing people whole at times, where he could just completely shut down possessions by himself. I thought last year his off-ball defense kind of suffered a little bit because he was trying to make the bigger play for the team. But Florida State's best offense was when they could get out in transition. And it's been that way for a few years, sadly. But Jamir spearheaded that, being able to create turnovers or come over with a weak side block. I know he averaged under a block per game, but he could block and come from the weak side and really disrupt the play. And if he got out in transition, he's super athletic, which granted a lot of people in the NBA are these days. But he's a great athlete, long wingspan, great defense, and you get him out in transition, he's gonna make a play, and that's what matters, especially in college. But as he gets into the NBA, I think that's gonna be the skill he can hang his hat on, and hopefully with the spacing around him, those numbers at the rim start to look a lot better. And I have reason to believe it will, because he's got the size, he's got the strength, he's got the frame, he's got everything he needs athletically and in his toolbox to be able to do that.
The Wizards aren't really in the draft for fit place of their rebuild here, but I think you can afford to do that with an older guy in 43, where it's a little less risky. And I actually see Jamir as a really, really good fit. Like, the Wizards don't have maybe the floor spacing that you'd want for him, but just an NBA court is bigger. There are more lanes already. We need the defense, like you said, the last toward the bottom in points off turnovers and things like that. But they're going to play with like crazy pace, and I think that will like really, really help him. He's a pretty good rebounder for a slender guy. I think the long arms and the athleticism definitely help there. But this is a dude that you trust to grab and go and start a fast break, not just be a finisher on the wing. So I think he gives them a lot of options. It seems like something that they want to empower people to do is, if you get the ball, just start it and put the defense on its heels. And, there may not be no better guy in the ACC at doing that than he was. I think some of this, you see just the obvious stuff with the shooting. To me, again, this comes down a lot to shot selection. I don't think the shot is like totally broken. It's a little wonky looking at times. Like, the balance is weird. He does a little elbow thing, but he has decent touch. Like you mentioned, the free throw shooting, despite having like kind of a rough stretch in the middle of the year here, still finished about 75%, was better than that the year before. So I don't think this is a guy that's like this total reclamation project that'll never shoot. It hasn't really gotten better percentage wise, but again, I still attribute a lot of that back to fit. Like, if you'd have parked him, at the 3 on Duke last year or something, and just let him spot up for easy catch and shoot shots, I have a feeling he would have made a decent amount more of them. We saw some shooting at the combine where it looked pretty smooth. He made a decent percentage, and that combine scrimmage, I think, really did a lot for him in terms of perception, because it was like, oh shit, like, this isn't just some chucker on a bad team. Like, this dude is a competitor. He's getting up in people. And I think that's another thing where the Wizards need a lot of help, is just that competitiveness factor. So a couple things there for you. One, just, do you buy that the shooting is a little better than advertised already? And two, can you talk about him as just sort of like, I don't know, everybody uses the term dog these days, but the Wizards need some of that. And I think definitely that's something he brings to the table.
I definitely think he's a better shooter than the 32% shows last year. I believe catch and shoot, he was in the 40s last year, but there just wasn't many catch and shoot opportunities for him. A lot of his shots were just off the dribble, trying to take deep step backs, deep pullbacks. Because again, that was a better shot than letting some of these other guys shoot. I absolutely buy that he's a better shooter. And it's not like you mentioned his free throws. It's not like he's only getting up a couple per game. He led the ACC in
Right.
free throw attempts
Yeah,
last
generally
year.
is great, even if you only shoot 75% on them. If you take that many, it's still awesome.
Yeah, and he was, I believe, top 15 nationally in fouls drawn per 40 minutes. So this is a guy that gets to the free throw line a ton. He had plenty of games in non-conference play where he's shooting 10, 12, 15 free throws in a game. He is adept at getting to the free throw line. But yeah, he is
Just
a
one thing on that
dog.
real quick too,
Yeah.
Austin, before and I just thought of it. I mentioned the half court finishing. I think sometimes when guys do hunt free throws like that, they worry so much about drawing the foul
Yeah.
that they're a little less like focused on actually finishing the basket. And that's one thing I wonder about with him a little bit of just like sometimes when you are a slender guy and bigger dudes are hitting you at the rim too, like that's something you gotta like just get used to over time. And this isn't like a guy that had this crazy role at a mid major where he was scoring 25 points per game. Like he kind of moved into this like scorer attacker role at Florida State. So it's a relatively newer thing for him. So just wanted to throw that in there for listeners a little bit. That may also be an area where we could see him, make some improvements here, just with some coaching and some situational stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely agree there. And you mentioned him being a dog. I'm trying to pull up his combine stats, but my internet's decided not to work with me. But he had 5 or 6 steals in that second scrimmage game, where I think a lot of people viewed him as a fringe draftable prospect, and then he comes out in that game and has something like 23 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 steals.
He was picking up full court, stripping guys at half court. It was awesome.
That's when everyone's like, this is a guy that has to be drafted. Where that is, I don't know, but he's got to be drafted somewhere. He is never going to back down from a challenge. His first year on campus, and Florida State's playing Miami, and Miami had Matthew Cleveland, who had just transferred away from Florida State after 2 years there. And let's just say the fan base wasn't very happy about it, which understandably. And Watkins had a great game. Cleveland did not. And not even 10 minutes after the game ended, Jamir Watkins is on his Instagram story with an old picture of Matthew Cleveland throwing down the U. So he's a competitive, fiery guy. But off the court, he's honestly kind of quiet. Hard worker, puts his nose down, just gets the work done. And then on the court, he just releases all that fire. Very, very fiery guy when he's on the floor and making the plays that he wants to make. And he should endear himself to Wizards fans pretty quickly.
I think another piece of this too, and we talked about it with that along those lines and competitiveness. It seemed like from afar this dude played his best in biggest situations. Like the better teams in the ACC, who presumably are well scouted and well defended and things like that, and have the best ability to shut someone like that down, are the teams that seem to have the most trouble doing that with him, and that seemed to be like largely force of will. Like first time they play Louisville this year, 9-15. For 25 points. Second time they play him, 7-16 for 23 points. Next game is against North Carolina, 7-12, 26 points. And then against Duke, 8-18, 21 points. And then that's littering the stat sheet, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, like some steals, some blocks, a little bit of everything. And that's just a dude that, I said this on another pod. We briefly mentioned Jamir. Just that felt like a dude that was taking like a spork to a knife fight. Like he just didn't have the same arsenal of weapons around him that a Cooper Flagg did and things like that. But he just wasn't willing to back down from that challenge or let Florida State kind of go quietly in those games. And now ultimately they got run in the Duke game. Like it didn't work out particularly well, but the Louisville games were close. The North Carolina game was pretty close. Like he kind of force of will kept them competitive in those games.
I'd also like to point out the Pittsburgh game, because at the time Pittsburgh was still viewed as a team that was, going to be competitive in the ACC. Like they're viewed as one of those top 4 teams. And then they come into Tallahassee and Jamir has 26 points, 8 rebounds, 6 of 13 shooting from the floor, 11 of 12 from the free throw line. And that was a chippy game where Pittsburgh tried to follow Florida State into the locker room. Like Coach Capel got pretty mad at Florida State and their fans. It was a pretty testy situation, but Jamir was far and away the best player in that game, him and Jalen Lowe, who transferred to Kentucky this offseason. But they both put up a show in that game, and a lot of it was just Jamir saying, hey, we need a win here at home. I'm not going to let this team lose to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and that's awesome. You love hearing stuff like that. And again, this Wizards team, they've loaded up with a lot of nice guys, which is great from a we don't have to worry about you off the court perspective. But you need, just my personal theory, you need a couple MFers, and Jamir being a nice, quiet guy off the court is great. But I think this is just a dude that, like, at a minimum, is going to push people in practice this year and going to force competition. And, NBA teams, they don't practice a ton in traditional, like, 5-on-5 sense and things like that. But this younger team, they're going to do it more than most. And I think having dudes like Jamir, there's going to be lots of opportunities for them. I think the older veteran guys, like, I promise you, Chris Middleton isn't having these, long, arduous practices. So
Yeah.
there's chances for Jamir to get in there and just make a Bilal Coulibaly work trying to bring the ball across half court and things like that. And that just ultimately makes your team better overall.
And there's just good veterans to learn from in general on this team, not just Chris Middleton, but Marcus Smart as well,
Yeah.
former defensive player of the year. That's something Jameer can learn from, as long as he doesn't pick up the flopping, in my opinion. CJ McCollum coming in over in that trade, I think, is going to be another great guy to learn from as he learns to initiate more offense in a more efficient manner. It's a good group of veterans for him to learn from. And yeah, as you mentioned, he's going to give Bilal Coulibaly some hell trying to bring that ball up the floor, and Keyshawn George as well, trying to defend him on the wing. I think the practice that they do have, and whether that's in summer league or whatever, he's going to make it interesting for them in those practices and in those scrimmages.
I love that. Just ultimately, what do you see his role being? I mean, let's start with year one, just for now, and then long term, what do you think he kind of turns into?
Yeah, I imagine he'll be on a 2-way contract that first season. I haven't seen anything
But I would imagine
stating otherwise. But I imagine he's on a 2-way contract. Maybe he gets into 15, 20 games in his rookie season as he develops that 3-point shot. If that 3-point shot develops, I don't see how he's not a rotation NBA player, just with how he is defensively, how he is competitively. It's a guy every team is going to want to have as a bench guy that can just come in and say, hey, get us a couple free throws, get us a couple shots, get us a steal or two. That's what teams want off the bench. And as a guy that's, 24, 25 years old almost, he's going to have to do that right away to carve out a role in this league. And to me, there's no reason he can't. But it's also, for me, it's super cool that he's on the Wizards. I know a lot of people in Washington may not like the name Leonard Hamilton from his one season as the head coach, but for me, for Coach Hamilton's last draft pick to go to the one NBA team he coached, for me, that's a really cool connection.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, the last Florida State player to end up on the Wizards is Chris Singleton, which wasn't particularly
fun fact. I've got a Chris Singleton Wizards jersey somewhere around here.
There you go. You might be on the short list, unfortunately. I thought that one would work out a little bit better than it did.
Same, yeah.
But that's okay. To me, like, people talk a lot about, all right, he'll do the defense and maybe he shoots it, all these things. I actually think there's some upside here as like a jumbo playmaker. And we talked about like 6'6"-ish, give or take. But this is a dude that ran offense, and like he kind of had to, like we talked about. But that's a great thing for him to have developed at the college level, or at least gotten some opportunities to try. And now, if you're Washington, you could just like give him the ball a decent amount of time and trust him to do some of these things. So I think this front office is always looking for stuff on the margins. And if you can really convert him into a big guard, and now one of your backup point guards essentially is this big switchable dude, that's really chaotic for other teams to have to match up with. And I think that would be a huge win for Washington if he's able to kind of make that transition into like a driver of offense, at the very least, just getting people into sets and starting plays.
That's the one thing I'm curious to see if it'll translate to the NBA is his on-ball creation, just because he did it so much at Florida State. And, we've talked about the spacing and the bad playmaking on those teams the last few years, but the turnovers are worrying. There's no two ways about it. A lot of times, I should say a lot of times, sometimes he's just getting double teamed, triple teamed, doesn't see the double team coming and makes a bad decision. Sometimes it's just a bad pass or two, but that's something he's got to clean up if that's going to be his role in the NBA as a backup big guard. In a sense, he absolutely can do it, and I agree with you. He's still got a long runway ahead of him. He was a late bloomer in terms of prospect, and an ACL injury at VCU kind of hindered that, but he's still got room to grow. Just outside the 3-point shot. Yeah, you absolutely nailed it. If he can be that on-ball creator for, a bench unit, sure, why not?
Yeah, fingers crossed that's something we can see a little bit more of over summer league here, and just see how it develops with the team. over time. Just Austin, as we wrap this up, any other things we should know about Jamir Watkins?
Just that you guys are going to love him almost immediately. He's going to come in. His first game in Summer League, I already know. He's going to come in and do something where you guys are like, this is our guy. I can't wait to plant my flag with this guy. He's such an awesome guy, such an awesome player. I really think you guys are going to love him in Washington.
This is a guy I had a late first round grade on personally. So when I saw it at 43, I'm like, cool. All right, let's rock. You know, there were some other guys like we kind of needed a big in the draft. So that would have been appealing to me as well. But, you know, if you just see the vision there, if we can turn him into that big kind of playmaking wing at the very least, and just a chaos agent on defense, you know, I think that's a win, and any team in the league would benefit from that. And I feel a little bad for him because I feel like he could probably be a dude that steals some minutes on like a playoff roster next year. But
that's where I thought he was going to go. A lot of the teams that were working him out were like the Milwaukee Bucks and the Cleveland Cavaliers, these teams that need just some kind of bench production from an older guy. So that's where I thought he'd go. But, you know, maybe this is best for him in his long-term development.
Yeah, there's an opportunity to play through some of those mistakes and clean up some of those turnovers and things like that too. So stakes aren't super high here for next year. So, you know, maybe we see more of him second half of the year after some of those bets move on. Austin, this has been great. I hope we have more Florida State, you know, prospects to talk about with you here in future years. I do think there's some sneaky things coming for ACC fans this year from Florida State. Like this roster a little bit better maybe than people look on paper, but I'm hopeful for you that this is a sign of things to come here.
I'm just glad they have more than 2 3-point shooters on the team, and we're taking it one step at a time right now.
Yeah, there might be a stretch big on this roster that ends up on an NBA radar here in the short term here. So fingers crossed, we can have another one of these chats here next year, and that means you guys have had a pretty good season. Austin, if anybody wants some more Florida State coverage, where can people find your work?
You can find me on Twitter /X/ whatever you want to call it at EasyVeazeyNG, or you can find my work on NoleGameday.com /basketball. That's where I do a majority of my stuff. I'm also on the Hear the Spirit podcast every week, twice a week when it comes to football season. And then if you want to read about other NBA teams, I also cover the Dallas Mavericks as well.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, this should be a fun year to get to cover Dallas. You have a couple exciting rookies to talk about there as well. So awesome. Great job, man. Really appreciate the insight. I've said this to the other guys when we've talked about their rookies too, but we'll take good care of your guy for you here with Jamir, and we'll just have to check in at some point, maybe after the season, and break down how it went down.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Matt.
All right, everybody, know the drill. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that like button for us. We always appreciate it. Rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we will catch y'all next.